UFP, the United Federation of Podcasts.
Engage.
78 years have passed since the days of the original USS Enterprise. Now a new Galaxy starship has been designed.
Transporter Chief, beam our listeners aboard. Welcome to Galaxy Class, a Star Trek Next Generation podcast here on the United Federation of Podcast Network. I am your host, Counselor Amy Nelson, who is going to channel Jo and change her title to be Mathematician Amy Nelson. Because today we are going to have a special Galaxy Class. It is my debut for a solo podcast, which I'm very nervous, and I hope that you will follow along with me. Because Jo and Rhea are over in Star Trek Destinations in London and having a fabulous time. Hopefully you are seeing pictures on the Federation Council chambers, or if you follow them on Facebook and Twitter, you will see wonderful pictures, and I am very jealous, wish that I could join them, and so glad that they are having a good time. And Kevin is out preparing for the season of Christmas as he prepares and gets moved into his house, which he just recently purchased, and he gets ready for his big Santa Claus season that is coming up. So we wish him the best as well. So it is just me, and hopefully everyone is enjoying their time off from this podcast, and I am here recording. I have a fun topic, but first let's check the communication array and see if we have any comments from our listeners.
Logs accessed.
So this is coming from our Future Imperfect podcast that we had last with Rhea and I. We're talking about Future Imperfect, which aired in 1990. And we have Paul Wright comments and says, "This is one of my all-time favorite TNG episodes, ! I remember buying this one on VHS tape years ago. I immediately noticed that the future uniforms incorporated the rank into the comm badges. I love stuff like that. These were also used in parallels with the rank pips. By the way, Data also wore red in Chain of Command when Jellicoe relieved Riker of his first officer duties." Thank you, Paul. I also, the badge was used in All Good Things for the future part of that. But yes, and of course, Data did wear red. I was having a hard time, Rhea and I were having a hard time remembering that. So thank you. Now, Greg Molumby writes, also his comments say, "You were talking about an episode where Data did take command. That was Redemption on the starship Sutherland. Future Imperfect is a fine episode. I always wonder if Barash and Jeremy from The Bonding ever met." Well, Greg, thank you so much for your comment. And the Sutherland, yes, that is the one, and I can totally picture it. That was the one I was thinking of. But yes, also parallels, Paul. So I am wondering if Barash and Jeremy also ever met. That would be interesting because we just, as was mentioned, they just leave the episode and Barash comes up on board and then we never know what happens. Hopefully he met Wesley and maybe Jeremy and, kids his age, if he's a kid. We don't know. So thank you so much for writing in with your comments. Appreciate all of the comments that you leave and the participation that you have with us.
This is the captain. Senior officers will report to my ready room immediately.
All right. Well, this title of the episode is Amy's Favorite Things. And I'm sure you can guess that one of my favorite things outside of Star Trek is math. I absolutely love teaching math. And I listened to a podcast that talks about Pac-12 football, college football. And I'm very much into college football, and listening to their podcast, out of the 12 schools that are in that conference, they sometimes will say, well, which school is most like a Disney princess? Or which coach is like a US president? And they just sort of do these comparisons. And that got me thinking, I could do that on my podcast, where I compare each crew member with a mathematical equation, bringing my two loves together. So I have done exactly that. I have thought of an equation or mathematical concept, and will pair that with a member of our bridge crew on the Enterprise D. I'm very excited. Hopefully you will remember some of these equations. I will prepare you. The equations I'm going to be using and highlighting mostly come from algebra, because that's my favorite. I love teaching algebra. Algebra 2 is my absolute all-time favorite. I like pre-calculus and algebra 1 and pre-algebra, but algebra 2 for sure is my all-time favorite. So there are equations from algebra 2 and just sort of algebra in general. There's also some probability, and there's some logic, and there's some statistics, and there's some geometry. So those are the different branches of maths that I will be pulling from. And if you just want to sit back and relax and enjoy and try and remember with me, hopefully I can explain these equations well enough for you to remember them. I know for some, math is a long time since you've studied it, which I completely understand. But these are equations that I deal with every day as I teach. So let's start. Oh, I don't know where to start. So let's start with Picard. Jean-Luc Picard, the captain of the Enterprise D. I have chosen the quadratic formula to pair with Picard. As a refresher, the quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. Now, I said that in a very normal talking voice, which is very difficult for me because when I teach this to my students, I make them sing the song that goes with it. And it is to the song Pop Goes the Weasel. So if you are familiar with that, you can sing along. And this is how I teach my kids how to remember the quadratic formula. And it goes a little something like this. X equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now, obviously, I'm not a singer, so you don't need to tell me how terrible that was. But that is the song, and I make my kids sing it. We all sing it in a chorus together, and they do happen to remember the quadratic formula, whether they need it or not. Now, why is the quadratic formula paired with Picard? Well, first of all, what does the quadratic formula do? It is the method for solving quadratic equations. And when I say solving an equation, that means finding what does x equal. Now, quadratics are formulas and equations that are raised to the power of 2. So it would start with something like x squared. Standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c. And quadratics are so used in the real world all the time. Anytime you throw an object up, or if you like spike a volleyball and you force something down, or you with force throw something to the ground, that will take the form, like if you were measuring the height versus time, that is going to be in the form of a quadratic equation. So basically, anything that you throw up must come down. That creates a beautiful parabolic shape, and that's what quadratic equations solve for. Now, there are multiple ways to solve quadratic equations. One method being solved by factoring. You could also use the square root method. You could solve by completing the square. Each of those methods works, but it doesn't work all the time. The quadratic formula, no matter what the situation, we can use to solve a quadratic equation. And that versatility is why I am pairing this with Picard. Because out of all the different methods that we can use to solve equations, the quadratic formula is the most powerful. It is the one that works consistently. If you are completing the square, that one does work consistently, but sometimes can be very difficult. With the quadratic formula, it is this very lovely, concise, easy, plug and chug type of formula. Solve by factoring does not work all the time, and solving by square roots does not work all the time. So why I like this is because Picard is the captain. It is his final say. So out of all the different methods that may be presented to him, he's going to make that determining factor and find the solution. And I feel that's what the quadratic formula does. I also feel like because there are so many different methods to solve a quadratic equation, and as I look at the progression on how I teach my students how to solve quadratics, I first start them with factoring, which could be similar to learning and going to Starfleet Academy. And then I teach the kids how to solve by square roots. And that works, again, part of the time and could be similar to, graduating and becoming an ensign. And completing the square, that is very difficult. And that could be Picard, where he's going through the command and becoming first officer. And then finally getting to the ultimate position on the ship of captain, and then learning the quadratic formula. So I like that those different parts or the different methods is also similar to Picard's advancement in rank as well. My third and final reason why I believe the quadratic formula goes with Picard is that the versatility of Picard, like he obviously is known as the diplomat, but when needs to, can be very action-oriented, as we've seen in the movies. But the quadratic formula in and of itself is so versatile to quadratics, and I think it's very fitting because Picard himself is versatile in how he analyzes the situation and decides to come up with a plan of action. So the first part of the quadratic formula is the negative b over 2a. That portion of the quadratic formula is the formula for calculating the line of symmetry, which is, as a parabola, it's symmetrical over a vertical line of symmetry. So I like that. And then the second part of the quadratic formula is the discriminant, b squared minus 4ac. And that's the item that's under the square root. Now, what the discriminant does is that it tells me how many solutions and which type of solutions they are. So if my discriminant, which again is b squared minus 4ac, if that number is greater than 0, then I'm going to have 2 real solutions. If my discriminant is exactly equal to 0, I will have 1 real solution. And if my discriminant is a negative number, meaning less than 0, then I will have 2 imaginary or 2 complex solutions. And I feel that, again, like the discriminant and the line of symmetry, like these are all important parts of quadratics, and the quadratic formula encompasses all of that. And I believe that that is what Picard is to our Enterprise D crew. So Picard is the quadratic formula. Have I convinced you? Let's next move to Geordi. Now, I'm not doing these in any particular order. I did have formulas come into mind. I have been thinking about this for a couple months now. So I knew for sure that Picard was going to be quadratic formula. And with Geordi being an engineer, he's one that used practical knowledge, like it's hands-on. And so for Geordi, I am using a statistical analysis called the empirical rule. Now, if you remember the empirical rule, this is when we are talking about normal distributions, normal curves. You might be familiar with a bell curve, all right? And then you have right down the middle is your mean, which is the average. And if you go out 1 standard deviation, you will have 68% of the population that will fall within 1 standard deviation of normal. If you go out to 2 standard deviations, you get 95% of the population, and 3 standard deviations, you get 99.7%. And that is called the empirical rule, otherwise known as 68, 95, 99.7. Now, why is this Geordi? Empirical means that it is so well known that it's common knowledge in the statistical world. I understand if you didn't know anything about empirical rule before then, but within the statistical world, empirical rule, that has been basically seen over and over and over again, so much so that it has become a rule. And in order to determine that z-score, so this is the actual equation I'm using with Geordi, is the z-score formula, which is data minus the mean value divided by the standard deviation. So that would be x minus mu over sigma. And because the empirical rule is based off of observation and experience, and it just really sums up Geordi's knowledge and how he applies his book smart to, say, the engines and everything in engineering. Like, he is taking his hands-on and using it and combining it. And I just really feel that sums up the empirical rule. Okay, this one's going to be fun. My next equation, I'm going to match up with to William T. Riker, and that is the slope-intercept form. The slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. This is taught for so many years. I remember teaching slope-intercept form in pre-algebra, or like Math 7, around 7th grade math. It's taught in 7th grade math, pre-algebra, 8th grade math, algebra 1 and algebra 2. Slope-intercept form is the most useful out of all the linear equations. Now, there are a couple other linear equations. One of my favorites is the point slope formula. That's y minus y1 equals m times the quantity x minus x1. But once you use that formula, you simplify it, and then it turns into slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. And I feel like because slope-intercept form is so useful, I felt like that fit with Commander Riker. When you learn slope-intercept form and you learn how to graph a line, the B is your y-intercept. And so you start and you plop a dot, and that's where you make your mark. And then you use the slope, the M of the y equals mx plus b. You use the M, and that's how you determine where your next point is going to be on the line. And as we all know, 2 points, one line goes through 2 points. So I feel like Riker is so useful, and he goes on away missions. He does crew evaluations. He comes up with brilliant ideas and suggestions for Picard. You know, he can take over, and he's a great leader. And so he's just like this best out of all of the linear equations. And with that point slope formula, I sort of feel like that could be like a Shelby character, because Shelby's coming in and she wants to be first officer, and Riker's just in the way. Well, when you boil it down and when you simplify the point slope formula, it turns into the slope intercept form. So I sort of feel like with Riker, like he's got the coveted job. Like all the other equations want to be like the slope intercept form, because when you have, say, like point form, when you simplify it, it simplifies down to the slope intercept form, y equals mx plus b. So like he's at the top of his game. He's on that Galaxy class. He's on the Enterprise D. That's the best of the best. And when you look at the linear equations, the best is y equals mx plus b. So I feel that the slope intercept form is a good equation for Riker. Now, as a line goes, your line can be horizontal, can be vertical, or it can be at a diagonal, either going positive or negative. And what determines the direction of the line is the slope. And I feel that however great slope intercept form is, y equals mx plus b, that's great equation, tells so much, but really it's just a horizontal line if you have no slope, just a flat line. And I feel that Riker is just a flat line without his Troy. And so for Troy, I am pairing her with the slope formula. Hang on, because you know Troy's my favorite. And slope, oh my gosh, you guys, slope is one of my favorite concepts. And I'm just going to try and tell you why. So hang with me. Here we go. Slope, the formal formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. It is also known as a rate of change, which could then look at the difference of y over the difference of x. And of course, difference meaning subtraction, which is from the formula. And going then into calculus with the derivative is dy dx, because you're finding the difference of the y's and the difference of the x's. So there's some calculus implications with slope. Rise over run is another way we can talk about slope. The change of y over the change of x. We could also have y over x and go into our trigonometry, which is the definition of tangent theta. So slope has implications in the algebra world, has implications in the trigonometry world, and has implications in the calculus world. Oh, major concept, slope. And as I said, slope controls the direction of the line. So your line can either have a positive slope, meaning as you read left to right, your line goes up increasing. Could have a negative slope, meaning going down. It could have a zero slope or no slope, and that would be your horizontal line. Or your slope could be undefined, and that's how I get a vertical line. And so why I put Troy with slope is because I love Troy and Riker together, especially in Picard in the episode Nepenthe. But I love them, seeing them getting married and Nemesis, and, they just belong together. So, with Riker having the slope-intercept form y equals mx plus b, like Riker's the line and doing good. And then there's a little saying that the man makes a decision and is the head, but the woman is the neck that turns the head. And I sort of feel like Troy with the slope is, controlling the direction of the line, but Riker is the line. So I sort of thought that was cute. But slope is so underrated. And I'm not sure that math teachers do it justice in showing that starting from just 2 points, creating a line, that we get to go into geometry and into algebra and into calculus and into trigonometry. Like, a lot of people don't understand that idea of slope and that concept runs through all of those different branches of mathematics. And I feel that is how Troy is underrated as well. Like, she's a valuable member of the crew, but I don't think they realize exactly how valuable with her intellectual promise and, for her finally becoming a commander in season 7, that obviously underrated. She could have become a commander much earlier. So with that, I think that's a good equation fit for Troy to be the slope, and with Riker having the slope intercept form. Okay. My next person that I want to pair is Worf. Good old Worf. And I'm going to pair him with the Pythagorean theorem. Hopefully you guys remember Pythagorean theorem states a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And this works for all right triangles. And why I paired this with Worf is because I feel Worf is very rigid, right? He's Klingon and he has tradition and honor and integrity. And though that's just exactly what it is. And like the Pythagorean theorem works exactly on right triangles. That's exactly what it is. There's 3 sides. You know exactly what you're solving for, what to do, finds the length of any missing side of a right triangle. We can do that. But there's more to Worf than just his Klingon side, because we know he was raised, with his human parents, and he joined Starfleet, the first Klingon to join Starfleet and be stationed on a ship. And so I feel like he's had the advantage of learning from and really bringing in Iddick into his life. And with the massage of the Pythagorean theorem, we can use that to solve for any triangle, not just right triangles. And I feel this is Worf joining Starfleet and being stationed on the Enterprise D. If we look at the law of cosines, the law of cosines starts out a squared equals b squared plus c squared minus 2ab times the cosine of a. You can see that there's parts of the Pythagorean theorem there, but because it's not this rigid right triangle, 90 degrees, we can use the law of cosines to find for all triangles, which I think, again, Worf is using his strategies and knowledge and culture that he's learned from the Federation and combining them with his Klingon to make him the best officer for the job. And I feel like when you have the Pythagorean theorem and compare that with the law of cosines, I think that's a good example of what WRF is. All right, on to Beverly. And unfortunately, Beverly was the one that I had a really hard time coming up with an equation for. But I did come up with one, and it is in the realm of logic statements. And there are 4 different logic statements. Could be a biconditional, and that's if and only if. So P, if and only if Q. The conditional, which I believe Beverly is, if P then Q. The conjunction is if P and Q. And the disjunction is the or statement, if P or Q. And out of all of those logic statements, I feel Beverly is the conditional statement. Because as a doctor, she's always looking for, if this is happening, what caused it? What's the explanatory variable? What's the response? What's happening? Finding those patterns and finding if this happens, then this. So I feel that it just really pairs well with her medical training. And even when she's is a scientist, right? She's looking and eliminating and looking for different variables. And as a doctor, like controlling one variable and then running another experiment, controlling another variable, and looking for these if-then statements. Now, even though there's conjunction, disjunction, conditional, and biconditional, conditional statement is the only one that has variations. And I love this because I feel like Beverly has many different layers, variations to her personality and character that we get to see. So let me just go over the math. So the logic statements for the variations would be the converse. So again, I'll start with the conditional is if P, then Q. And the converse is if Q, then P, meaning we switched the order. And I know Beverly would do that in a heartbeat as she's looking at these factors and trying to figure out solutions. Now, the inverse is if not P, then not Q. The contrapositive is if not Q, then not P. And the negative of the conditional statement is P and not Q. There are 4 different variations, and I just feel that Beverly has that complexity, right? She's a mother to Wesley. She's an excellent friend to Troy. She's a wife and a lover to Picard. Well, a wife to Jack Crusher and maybe potential lover to Picard. That's a debate we've had many times. But also her love of science, and her love of acting, like the dancing doctor, right? So all of these layers, but yet so logical. Think about Remember Me, where she's going through every scenario and it's like, man, if there's nothing wrong with me, then there must be something wrong with the universe. Like that is pure logic. And so I feel that the conditional statement pairs nicely with Beverly. Now, on to our good friend Data, our android. This one I feel is so fun. The equation I want to pair with Data is volume of a sphere. And this is a geometry concept. And the volume of a sphere is 4/3 times pi times the radius squared. So 4/3 pi r squared. And why I felt this so perfectly matched up with Data is because Data, we have this android. He has this program, but he's trying to be more than his program. He wants to understand human nature. He's trying to grasp this undefined concept that makes us sentient, that makes us human, that makes us something that he wants to be. And I feel like with him learning all of these different skills to try and understand humanity, painting, dancing, comedy, acting, violin, right? All of these things. Like if we summed up his parts, he would be greater than the sum of his parts. And I feel that in the sphere equation, that the improper fraction 4/3 represents that. I feel like Data is definitely more than the sum of his parts, and 4/3 being improper, where 4 is greater than 3, part to whole. So 4/3 improper fraction, meaning more than the sum of his parts. I also like volume of the sphere equation because there's this irrational number pi. And I feel like with Data, that's that part of his programming that truly makes him, in our eyes, that he has feelings, that he has understand humanity. We've heard so many times Picard saying, Data, because you've done this, you understand humanity. You are grasping this. You are learning it better than humans are learning humanities. So I feel like this volume of the sphere really encompasses, get it? A sphere encompasses Data's personality and his contributions to the Enterprise D. It's just so beautiful and yet so complex. Like when you think about pi, it's 3.14. Very simple. We all know pi is 3.1415926. And then those decimals keep on going and going forever and ever, never repeating, never ending. Definition of irrational number. So we've got 4/3, more than the sum of his parts. Pi, this beautiful, enigmatic, simple yet complex idea, number. And then r squared. And I like the radius as like his programming. And so we have Data's programming acting as the radius, and then swishing that around gets us a sphere. I think Data, volume of a sphere, matches up perfectly. Now, I have an honorable mention, and that is for our good friend, Wesley Crusher. And when I think about Wesley, he's the genius kid, and therefore make him an outlier. So I'm going to have Wesley be the outlier equation formula that we use in statistics. Now, when you think about statistics and we're finding the mean and standard deviation, like I talked about with Geordie and the empirical rule, now with Wesley, we use the median and the interquartile range. Okay, so different than with Geordie, we're using the mean and standard deviation. So remember, mean, median, and mode, those are the 3 different ways to find the middle. So Geordie's going to use the mean and standard deviation. And with Wesley, we're going to use the median and the interquartile range. Now, to be an outlier means that you need to be 1.5 times better or worse, depending on if you're an upper or a lower outlier. And with Wesley, I will use an upper outlier because he is obviously above and beyond his maturity and intelligence compared to other teenagers his age. So the upper bound outlier formula is 1.5 times the IQR added to quartile 3. Okay, that's what creates the range. And so if anything goes above that, then it would be considered an outlier. Now, the IQR is called the interquartile range, and that is where we subtract quartile 3 from quartile 1. Nope. Scratch that, reverse that in the other order. That is where we take quartile 1 and subtract it from quartile 3. So that gets us the interquartile range, which is 50% of our data. So again, if I go 1.5 times greater than that, then that is how I get an outlier. And so with Wesley, with him being above head and shoulders, all the other kids his age, like he makes it into Starfleet. He has integrity, he's so intelligent, and he's so mature, and he's just so cute that he definitely is an outlier. Well, listeners, that is all that I have for you with my equations. I would absolutely love to hear your feedback. If you have any other equations that you might have thought of that would pair nicely, maybe you want to give me a nice equation for Guinan or Tasha Yar. I would love to hear that.
Incoming transmission.
And you can do that on the Federation Council Chambers Facebook group on Facebook. That's funny. It's what happens when I go off script. Yes, the Federation Council Chambers is there in the Facebook. Oh my goodness. You can also send me an email or send us an email at galaxyclass@ufp.earth. And you can also follow us on Twitter at galaxyclasspod.
Priority 1 message from Starfleet coming in on secured channel.
Please hit the subscribe button on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts to leave us a star rating and a written review. That helps others to find our show. You can also follow the entire network podcast with our master feed by searching United Federation of Podcasts. This way you won't miss any of our fine shows like Franchise Fatigue, Always Hold On to Arrow, History with the Szilagys, Mickey's Marvels, Sasquatch, and Infinite Diversity. Now you can find me on Twitter at Miss Amy Nelson, and I am, of course, on our Facebook group page, Federation Council Chambers. If you'd like to help us keep all of our shows coming to you each week, you can become a patron of the network on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/UFPEarth to get all the details. A huge shout out to Davey Willett for our very own show supporter. Thank you so much. We would like to also recognize our executive producers, Brandon Shea Mutella, Ken Tripp, Zach Moore, and Tony Robinson. We would also like to thank Zach Tripp for our opening and closing music, and Tony Robinson for our amazing artwork each and every week. Well, listeners, thank you so much for putting up with me and my crazy love of math and my awesome love of Star Trek. If, again, you want to have us make more comparisons, please send us an email, shoot us a message on Facebook, and let us know what other things we could compare our crew to. I think this was really fun, a fun little thought experiment for today. And thank you for listening and beaming aboard Galaxy Class. And until next time, x equals -b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a.
Engage.
This has been a production of MTMR Media Works.